get started. If you wouldn't mind, please mute your mics and we'll go from there. Lois, if you can go ahead and begin the recording. Hello, my name is Brian Clark, and I am going to be leading this webinar on source evaluation in an online environment, the Pandemic and Election Edition. Just a few notes. You can go ahead and ask questions in the chat, but I will not be looking at them until closer to the end. There will be time for discussion, and we can look at questions then, but feel free to ask them and put them in chat as we move through the webinar. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so in this webinar, we are going to look at three issues that we are facing today dealing with information literacy. And then we're going to look at a number of solutions or answers to the problem that are currently out there. So the first bit of information we're going to look at, first problem, is something called information disorder. And this was a term coined by First Draft. And basically what they're doing is they put together terms such as disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation, and they collectively called it information disorder. And so on our next slide, you'll see the 7 common forms of information disorder. And we have satire or parody, misleading content, imposter content, fabricated content, false connection, false context, and manipulated content. And so we've been seeing these more and more, especially as social media has become really the location where people generally go first for their news. Now, that's obviously not the only place. You know, we still go out to the news sources. Those of us who still have cable watch the news on the television, but social media has really quickly become the primary source for the world's news. And with that, these 7 common forms of information disorder have become fast-growing trends. And so as we look at these, what we find, especially when it comes to the pandemic and the election, is that these can be quite dangerous when not understood, right? And so the way that information is spreading about the pandemic, it's dangerous to our health if we're not finding the correct information. And when it comes to the election, well, there's just a lot of temperament that is running high when it comes to this election and the 2 candidates running. And so the information disorder that is out there on these 2 topics is really working against us, and it's allowing us to fall into traps that others are leaving, and they're leading us here on purpose. And so it's important that we look at these 7 common forms and find ways to understand them ourselves and to show them and explain them to our students. Again, if you could mute your mic, if your mic is not muted, that would be great. So the second form of problem that we are looking at is confirmation bias. And this is the idea that we are only looking at media and news that is agreeing with what we already believe, right? And so um, when we look at the pandemic and we look at the election, right, we're only looking at the channels that we believe are accurate. And so with the pandemic, we either believe in mask wearing or we don't. And we either believe that it's airborne or we don't. And um, the amount of information and where we're getting it from can really determine what it is that we get from that. And with the election, it's just the two sides are so polarizing right now that it's hard to find what is accurate and truthful in the middle. And so one thing that has come out of this is Ad Fontes Media has produced yearly a media bias chart, and this is the 2020 version 6.0. And what they do is that they are looking at media, at the media landscape across two dimensions, reliability on the vertical axis and bias on the horizontal axis, excuse me. And then they are testing it and rating it and putting them into different categories. And you can see over here on the right-hand side, there are the most reliable sources, the mixed reliable sources, somewhat unreliable, and the unreliable. And so if you look at it, it forms an inverted V. And so our most reliable sources occur at the top and in the middle. And so you see AP Routers is basically the best of the best. Weather Channel is up there, so you can always count on them for weather information. That's good to know. But then you can also see that CBS is on there, PBS, Bloomberg, CNN for the web is in the most reliable, but CNN for TV is not. And so you can see that there are quite a few of mainstream media sources in this most reliable box. But then as we move to mixed reliability, which is in the center underneath most reliable, you can see that there's some overlap. So the dotted line is very vague, but there's some overlap between most reliable and mixed reliable, and then you start to get further down, right? So CNN TV, TMZ, New York Post, the Washington Times, Daily Mail, all of these are of mixed reliability based on their factors of reliability and bias. And then when you get all the way to the left and to the right on your bias, you see the somewhat unreliable factors like MSNBC TV, Jacobin, and then on the other side, we have CNSnews.com, lifenews.com, Fox News Web is right on the border between mixed reliability and somewhat unreliable. And then somewhat unreliable continues down below where we have Occupy Democrats, Daily Kos, Alternet, Fox News TV, Twitchy, WND, and then down at the bottom for unreliable, we have the very far right and the very far far left, and these are the places that we don't want to go. And so by having this chart, we are able to see for ourselves and for our students what sources we can focus on. And we're able to push ourselves and our students in the right direction so that we aren't leaning too far one way or too far the other way, but really trying to hit as close to neutral and reliable as we can. And so we always want to try to stay within this top grouping to get as close as we can to eliminate our confirmation bias, because even if we are used to looking on the left and on the right for our personal information, when it comes time for professional information, we really need to focus on what is considered the top. And then the third problem that we see is just that students especially don't understand how the information creation cycles work. All right, and so this graphic shows that, so a key event happens, and let's take the pandemic as our example, right? So the TV, radio, and web are providing immediate coverage on events related to the pandemic. So information about who's getting sick, information about reports on what does and doesn't work for the pandemic, for protecting yourself against the pandemic. And they're doing immediate coverage, but because it's immediate, it's basic and has a tendency to be inaccurate, and it's prone to speculation because their goal is to get it out as fast as possible. In today's world, you're rewarded for being first, not for being correct. And so that trend has forced journalists to really promote information that they have not 100% verified. So then you see newspapers, which is 1 day to 1 week away from the key event, and they are going to look at a deeper investigation, and they have improved accuracy because they have time to vet their sources. They have time to make sure that what they're reporting follows their standards. It's not going to be fly by the seat of your pants reporting. It's going to have a little bit more oomph, if for lack of a better term, behind what they're able to report. Then you get down to popular magazines, and these take 1 week to 1 month or more, and you're able to see within popular magazines that you're looking at beginning analysis and the discussion of the impact on society, right? And so these journalists are taking, advancing from the immediate coverage, and then they're taking the coverage from the newspapers and the analysis that was there, and they're applying it to society, right? So they're analyzing it. They're looking at what is happening because of these key events, right? So they have the opportunity, because of the added time frame, to step back and look at the key event from outside rather than just reporting it from inside the moment. Then we get down to the bottom of the information cycle where we have academic journals. Then academic journals are 6 months or more, and they're of a narrow focus, they're very accurate, and they're peer reviewed. This is why we push them as librarians, because we know that they're written by the experts, and they're written for an educated audience. So where these first three are written for a general audience, right? They're written for anybody who can either click on the immediate coverage or subscribe to the newspaper or popular magazines, or in this day and age, click on the articles in the newspaper and popular magazines, right? Because a lot of this has moved digital as well. But these academic journals, these are taking added time to make sure that what they are looking at is as accurate as possible. And it is a extremely narrow focus in order to get as much depth as they can on their topic. And what we find with academic journals is usually, but not always, there is some sort of study that goes along with vetting the information that they're looking at, right? So they are doing some independent study to look at the key event to find out how it works within their field of expertise and what is coming out of it and what is being deemed accurate from it. So again, if we look at the pandemic, right? So when the pandemic first started, there was a lot of disagreeing, and there still is a lot of disagreeing immediate coverage on what is and is not good related to the pandemic. And then the newspapers and the popular magazines, well, they've started to vet through that information and see what is accurate. And then by the time academic journals are now starting to come out that have been fully vetted, that have taken the time to go through the peer review process, and we're starting to see more accurate case studies, more accurate science that is proving or disproving what we found in these previous boxes, right? So we're able, with these academic journals, to take the previous information and determine and analyze and study what was correct and what wasn't. And then the last section of the information creation cycle are books. And obviously, we have not seen books on the pandemic. And we have not seen where this is going to lead. But the books that are going to come out from the pandemic are going to be very eye-opening on what went right and what went wrong in these key areas, right? Because, oops, I didn't mean to click. Go back. Because the books are going to be looking at it through a historical lens. They're going to be looking at it after the fact. If we get to after the fact on this pandemic, the books are going to be looking at what happened, how it was handled, and what came of it, right? So, all of this fly by the seat of your pants information and this vetted information is going to be analyzed on a whole, right? It's not just looking at small key events, but it's taking a historic lens to look at the entire picture. And so if we look at it from the election side, we can see how this took place for the whole creation cycle from the 2016 election, and we can see how it's starting to take place from the 2020 election, right? So in 2016 and 2020, we had and are having immediate TV, radio, and web coverage, right? This is the information that's coming out minutes to hours after the events are happening. So, after the debates or after the rallies or after the hearings in Congress, these are the key pieces of information that are coming out immediately. but they're focused through a basic coverage in order to get it out first, to get it out ahead of everybody. Well, then the newspapers and popular magazines, they're taking a more distance approach. So once the events are happening, they're able to look at it and explain it further, look at it more in depth, right? And then the academic journals, you know, we're not there for academic journals for the 2020 election, but the 2016 election, there are plenty of academic journal articles out there that analyze what happened, what went right or what went wrong, depending on where you stand, and they're helping analyze through an expert field and a specialized field what happened during that time frame. And again, for books, we don't have any from the 2020 election, but we've seen tons of books from the 2016 election, right? They just keep coming. And we see them from both sides, right? So, we're still dealing with a bias. Like everything written anymore, it seems, has an inherent bias. And we have to strive to understand that bias and understand what we're looking at. But these books, from a historical lens, they are looking at a complete picture that we can't see in these previous boxes. So we've started to see a complete picture of the 2016 election, right? We've seen what happened in the election and in the first few years of Trump's presidency. We've seen from books what is taking place. It'll be interesting to see what books are written about the 2020 election, because a lot of them are going to combine with the books about the pandemic, right? Because really, they're not two separate events anymore. They're one and the same. They are fueling each other and they're leading each other. So looking at these three issues and understanding these three pieces of information, what can we do about them to help our students understand and help ourselves understand? So there are three types of factors that we can look at. So the first factor is tools. So what I've done is I have pulled three specific tools that really help figure out where the media stands and how we get that information. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the first one, which is NewsGuard Tech. And give it a minute to load. So NewsGuard Tech, it's an app that gives a rating of green. Now, can you see my web browser, or do I need to switch my share?
No, I don't see it.
Don't see
Bryan,
it? Okay.
yeah, you need to switch your share, I believe, Bryan.
Yep, I'll do that. That's what I figured, but always better to be safe. Okay, so you should now see the NewsGuard website. And so the NewsGuard app, it's an internet trust tool, right? And so they provide trust ratings for all the news sites that count for 95% of engagement, right? That is their goal. They cover over 6,000 news websites. And what they do is, if we go to how it works, let's try this one then. There we go. That link worked. So what they do is they have 4 rating categories: green, red, satire, or platform. And how they arrive at these rating categories is they look at 9 specific criteria. And they have definitions for their criteria on this page. And then they give them a grading scale. And so these add up to 100 points. And so these 9 criteria are what they determine on if it's green, red, satire, or platform. So in order to get a green check mark for their rating, you have to get a score of 60 or above. All right. And what's great about this app is you can install it. If we go to Get NewsGuard, you can install it, and it's free, and it will work both in your social media and in your search results. And so you're able to see what's going on. And so there is a cost. It's free with a 2-week trial, and then after the 2 weeks, it's $2.95 a month. But it's providing access to a balance that you can't see elsewhere. And so you can see once you've installed it, it will show up in your, that was your search results, that was your social media, within information that you share on your pages. So, and then it will show you what it checked on or what it did not check on. And so you're able to see quickly and easily what it is that is working for it. So then if I go back to my PowerPoint, the second tool that we can look at is the media bias fact check. And I'll click on that. And the media bias fact checked, again, it is an app. Well, it's not an app in the same way that NewsGuard is. It does have the fact checked icon, and you can add it to Facebook and Twitter, but it doesn't work on all browsers. So what is really useful about the media bias fact check is that it puts the different websites into specific bias lists. So if we go to least biased, what we're going to see what we would see if it was working is a list of news agencies and news websites that are considered the least biased based on their strict methodology that rates and categorizes these resources, right? So let's see, I don't know why that one wasn't working. Let's try a different list. I just think my internet's running slow, which is what happens in the pandemic. But so they will provide links directly to these specific media sources so that you can go from here to search for news, right? And so you can use this as a starting place to search for news to find more information. So then if I go back to my PowerPoint, and unlike NewsGuard, the Media Bias Fact Check website, that is free to use. And then when we get down to this third tool, the factual, like NewsGuard, this is going to have a cost associated with it. But what the factual is going to do is, what the factual does is it combs through news articles and it gives you an email based on unbiased news and trending topics. All right. And so it goes through all the articles that are printed. So it says that every day over 10,000 articles are published on hundreds of topics. And so the factual automatically analyzes the credibility based on the diversity, the tone, and the author's expertise. And then for $3 a month or $12 a year, you get a daily email that sorts through these news articles to help you see where they actually lie along that spectrum of credibility. So those are the tools that I focus on. And there are more out there. Like, these aren't the only three that function for credibility and for bias, but they are three more widely considered tools that you're able to focus on and use. And yes, the NewsGuard Tech app and the factual email comes at a cost, but when we're dealing with all of the forms of disinformation, sometimes that cost is necessary in order to make sure that we're looking at the proper channels. So after tools, well, the next thing we want to look at is partnerships. And again, there are more than just the three that I'm pointing out, but these three partnerships, Trusting News, Trust Project, and the News Integrity Initiative, they work, rather than with you and the public, they work with the journalists and the news agencies in order to make sure that they are providing the best information. And let me just close some of these previous tabs. Okay, so Trusting News, basically their goal right up here at the top, you can see, is they're helping journalists earn news consumers' trust. And so what they do is they provide courses and text message training and trust tip newsletters to help journalists find their way back to an unbiased nature, right? So they are working with newsrooms to help take the bias back out of the news. And they're doing this on an individual basis with the journalists, but also on a collective basis with, newsrooms as a whole. And so you're able to see that the partnership is working to benefit the readers by working with the journalists. Then the second partnership that I find intriguing right now is the Trust Project. Now, the Trust Project this organization has a very similar goal to Trusting News, in that they're working with the news agencies. But what they're doing is rather than providing sources and resources for the news agencies to use, they are partnering with agencies where they can prove that they focus on 8 trust indicators, and if they do, they if they focus on these 8 trust indicators and they can prove that they use them, that website gets a trust mark added to the website. And the trust mark, you can see it right here in this video. It's just a black T in a white box. And they are working with several hundred currently news websites and working to build their base and trying to get as many news websites as possible to include this trust icon or the trust mark, excuse me, to make sure that their websites are showing the public that they can be trusted, that they are following these 8 trust indicators, that they're answering these questions transparently, and that they are showing everybody, where they're getting their information and how they're getting it. And so the Trust Project is working to benefit you. It's not an app, it's not a centralized website you can go to, but it's a tool that the journalists and the news websites can use to make sure that the reader understands where they come from and that they can be reliable. And then if we go back to the PowerPoint, and I know I'm going quickly, but I want to make sure that I get through all of it and leave time for discussion. The last partnership that I want to focus on is the News Integrity Initiative. And, oh, maybe it doesn't want to load. Okay, let me just go back to the website, and I'll just search for it myself. So the News Integrity Initiative, this is provided through a university, through a journalism school, and they they're on their second full initiative, and what they're doing is that they are working with journalism, with newspapers, with websites, and their first initiative was to advance media literacy and increase trust in journalism. Their second initiative that they're working on right now is working on improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're trying to work with news agencies to better integrate journalists of color into the media landscape. And so currently they have 3 core areas where they're addressing the conditions in the workplace, they're presenting strategies for improving diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they're giving media entrepreneurs of color greater access to capital, right? So they're helping them find ways to fund through grants these news agencies that are working with this. And so they've already done this with media literacy, and so they've already set about improving the trust in journalism, and now they're taking it from a diversity standpoint to again increase the trust in journalism from a different perspective. So you can see that they're working for us to better journalism at the source. right? So these three partnerships are working um, at the source to help us get better news. And so again, there are more partnerships, but these three stand out as definite improvements and ways of working with the journalists in order to get the best information. And then the final piece I want to look at is online courses. And there are dozens of these out there. And you'll see again, I only focus on three. But that's not to say that there aren't more out there. And I'm sure many of you know others besides these. So the three courses that I focus on for this webinar are uh, the Crash Course, which is a YouTube series on how to navigate the internet, Prep for the Polls, which is a text message course, and Checkology, which is a provides lessons on how to navigate today's information landscape. So if I go to the Crash Course webpage, and you'll see it is a YouTube, and there are multiple topics within the Crash Course um, framework, and these are made by John Green, the author, and his brother. And so these 10 videos will total 2 hours and 24 minutes, but they will walk you through, walk you and your students through how to navigate information. And so you can see that they look at the basics of civic online reasoning. They look at who's behind the information. They look at evaluating the evidence, and they look at checking other sources. So they explain in 10 videos how to do all of this um, in from a general populace. So they show you how to do this, and the videos, they're uh, usually just under 15 minutes. So they're a little longer than a normal video, but a lot shorter, sorry, longer than a normal YouTube video, but a way to either to spend time yourself or show your students how to get a quick rundown of this type of information. And then if I go back to PowerPoint, prep for the polls, I found this to be quite interesting because it is a text message course that is set up specifically for new voters. So it's perfect for our students and, you know, getting it out there, getting the information out there. I mean, there's still time, there's still 1 month left. And so all you do is you enter your, you enter your phone number right there, click start, and you receive an activation message. And then you start getting text messages to help you understand how voting works and what you need to do about it. And so MediaWise has put this together to make sure that, you know, the information gets out there, and by being a text message platform, it gets out there in a different way than most of the other sources, right? It's not just noise. Because it's coming as a text message, it's not just something else, something additional to scroll through. It's finding a way to reach uninformed first-time voters at their phones, at the source where they can find information better. And then the last course that I want to point out is this Checkology. And I apparently didn't click it right. Let's try again. I think I got it that time. All right, and so Checkology, their goal is to tell the difference between fact and fiction, and it's just a virtual classroom. And you can register for Checkology, and they are going to lead you either as education, as your educator, student, or independent learner. They're going to lead you through the Checkology courses to help you determine fact or fiction, how we determine that information disorder and what's actually happening. So we have about 15 minutes left. I have talked for 45 minutes, so now I open it up to you. Any thoughts on the topic in general? Any tools, courses, or partnerships that you use or look at? What are your thoughts right now on the subject?
Bryan, this is Amy. Hi.
Hi, Amy.
um, when you went through the information cycle, I have a
Yes,
tool that I use that I have used for a couple, and I'll post a link on it for in the chat for it. But it
great.
expands that a little further in both ends. Before it
Okay.
even gets to, I think you started off with
Here,
magazines and
yeah.
um,
Let me see if I
newspapers.
can get
Yeah, if you back up.
back to,
Yeah,
there it
you
is.
started off with TV and the radio and the web.
Right.
That the one I have goes back even to starts off with Wikipedia,
Oh, great.
and it throws in social media as well too, specifically like Twitter and stuff
Hmm.
like that. Um, and it takes one event. In this case, the one I have, it uses the Women's March.
Hmm.
And it starts it off with, I guess the Wikipedia page for the Women's March was created like 2 weeks before the Women's March actually happened.
Okay.
So that's where they put Wikipedia at the top, and then you had the Twitter and stuff like that. I will do that, yes, Beth. And then it goes through, and most of them match. And then at the very end, for some reason, they put archives, which I thought was interesting.
Hmm.
And then they also put in podcasts at the end. And I thought podcasts was a little odd to put there. I would have moved podcasts up on the list a little bit. But anyway, I thought of that too. So there is something that can expand on that information creation cycle a little bit more.
Hmm. Definitely. In the chat, Jason Ertz, co-chair of Information Literacy Committee, so plug for that. Jason posted that Mike Caulfield has some great videos around lateral reading, and he posted the YouTube link, and then Amy just posted the link she was talking about as well. So more tools there for sure. Other thoughts?
Bryan, this is Troy Swanson from Moraine Valley.
Hi, Troy.
Um, and thank you for the work on this presentation and the good thinking. It was great. One of the challenges I think that we face that is difficult is that we really have competing worldviews over this. So having sources that this is like when you have a whole mode of thinking that undervalues or just out of hand says fact checkers are biased. So you like
Hmm.
people that won't that think Snopes is a left-wing conspiracy. At some point, if we're really going to find shared ground and understanding in the world, we have to have modes of reflection and have students and others be able to reflect on where their belief systems originate, because this is not just a situation of adding more facts. Like, we're not at an information deficit where if we can just find better information, we're all going to agree. And there's a lot of research that, supports this, that telling people more information, in fact, could have a backfire effect where people may have a view that we think is a conspiracy theory view or a biased view, and giving them the correct information actually grounds them in their view because people get defensive and push back. And so I think, even back at the beginning of your presentation, when you brought up the confirmation bias and that kind of stuff, I think connecting confirmation bias with identity, with worldview, and I don't have the formula, I don't have the right answer quite yet. I've been doing a lot of thinking about it. I mean, that to me is where the foundation of information literacy lives. And we need to be thinking about how we have our students and ourselves explore our own foundations to be open to, before a source can even impact us, we have to understand how we are interpreting that source, why it's valuable to us, etc. Right? And I think that's that kind of credibility level starts with personal identity, and to get to there. And again, I don't have all the answers, but I just wanted to make that comment. So thanks.
No, Troy, I think that's a great comment. I mean, we're seeing people stick their heels into where they stand on information more than they ever have. I mean, I don't know the number of times that I've had to sit with a student and work with them on where their belief is coming from in order to get them to even accept the research. So yeah, I mean, it's a different world for sure. I mean, we don't have the ability to just, I mean, yes, the tools and the courses, they're great, but until you get a student to understand why they need to use them, I agree that we're missing a piece. But there isn't a formula. It's an individual one-on-one conversation. That's the only way I've found that we can work through this, is because if you try to work with people on as a group, it's groupthink, and they're not going to see what you're trying to tell them. They're going to back into their huddle and see what they see already.
Well, there's a tool, a classroom tool called debiasing, and I forgive me that I don't remember where that reference is from. I'd have to dig in my notes. But basically, if you take a ill-structured problem, so something like, what should the minimum wage be? So there's no right answer to what the minimum wage be, right? There's just a value judgment based on a whole bunch of factors. And you say to the class, let's just look at every angle. And the goal isn't to pick one. The goal is to outline as many stances as possible. And there's probably better examples. This is just off the top of my head. But the idea is that you encourage students to let go of their own stances and to openly see where all the different points of view on a particular topic might be. So, you could ask students to hunt down, what does, the Chamber of Commerce say? What do liberals say? What does Bernie Sanders say? What does whoever say, right? And just try to outline as many perspectives and how those people justify their perspectives. What are their sources? And then somewhere at the end, you have individuals consolidate, what they think. But that way it stops students from turning off initial perspectives and reactions on a topic and tries. And again, nothing's perfect. Everyone has their biases, of course. But that is like one thing that I've read that seems to be like a useful approach for a group to work through a difficult question that might be controversial.
Thanks, Troy. If you can find where that's from, send me an email and I will shoot it out to the NIL serve along with us.
Hi, Brian. This is Ruth Whitney from Oakton Community College.
Hi, Ruth.
I wonder, I've been playing around with sort of expanding on two ideas to get students to work through sources. And it's a combination of Mike Caulfield's 4 Moves in a Habit or lateral thinking, and also just deconstructing the CRAP test. So talking about both of those tools and then asking students to come up with their own version of the CRAP test. So have them think about what they would use to decide whether something is reliable, or, what getting them to know what one example is and then move from that to create their own. I wonder if anybody else has done anything with that. I'm still at the very beginning stages of working on this.
Oh, I really like the idea of having them create their own. I mean, that's something that, I mean, we never do, right? I mean, generally speaking, we get 5 to 10 minutes in a session to talk about the crap test, right? It's, you know, if we can sneak it in, talk about it, great. If not, you know, we get to mention it. But, you know, most faculty, at least that I've worked with over the years, they just want show them how to get sources, show them how to cite sources. But if we were given the time to allow them to dive in and dissect the crap tests and build their own to see, you know, what is valuable and what isn't, I think that's a great, could be a, you know, a great tool and a really great resource for sure. I like that. I've not seen that before though, so you might be onto something brand new.
This is Rochelle from Heartland Community College.
Hi,
And I
Rochelle.
wish, wonderful presentation, lots of useful tools.
Thank you.
I was wondering how people are integrating this sort of thing, whether it's like at the reference desk or you're doing it in instruction classes. Because I know for instruction, most instructors just really I want to use, you know, 4 scholarly journals, and we're not really getting into like the modern information economy at all. They're just very set in doing a traditional scholarly kind of research thing.
Right. I would say that my best access to working with students is when I'm embedded in a course, because I see them multiple times. So I get to choose, I work with the instructor to choose multiple topics. It's not just the one and done, but then I also generally see the students one-on-one after I visit the class. So I'm able to do both, work at the reference desk and work in an instruction field. But no, I don't generally get that ability unless I'm embedded and working with the class and faculty on multiple occasions.
Okay, that makes sense.
This is Amy from ICC, and I would probably add to that a little bit. I think a lot of it depends on the partnerships that you can make with the faculty. And I think also in some ways, you know, and this sounds weird, but we kind of have to we're the people who find these tools. Sometimes we just kind of have to say, and here, faculty, here's this. I know, for example, that information cycle one that I shared a few minutes ago. I shared that with a faculty member that I work with quite closely, and she's totally embraced it. And that was like the first week of her class, and I had nothing to do with it other than to point the instructor to it. And then she ended up basing a whole assignment on that thing, basically. So I think a lot of it depends on the relationships that we can build, and sometimes just being able to say, and here's some information on that particular kind of thing. Have at it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it can't always be us all the time. We have to delegate and form those relationships in order to delegate.
If I could add to that a little bit, I would just to add to that, Brian.
Yeah.
Is the Information Literacy Committee at Nilrock here is actually our theme around the next couple of years is going to be integrating information literacy in the classroom. How to get faculty information literacy under how to help promote information literacy within the classroom faculty. And so that's part of the theme of the Nilrock Information Literacy Committee for the next year or two, I think.
Yeah, we are. We're just starting to work on this new multi-year project on working with faculty, understanding how faculty are using information literacy. So, you know, if obviously there's a lot of discussion to be had about this, and I know we could probably continue, but if you want to continue this discussion, consider joining our committee, because we are going to be diving into this. We're going to be looking at data. We're going to be surveying librarians and faculty to get to a better understanding, so then we can hopefully create some tools or create some guidance on how we as librarians and they as faculty best reach the students with information literacy levels. And so you can email Jason or I, or you can email the director, Lois, director of NOROC, and we can get you onto the committee and get you involved in these discussions. So it's 1:30, so I am going to say thank you for joining me. Like I said, I'm sure there's plenty more discussion we could have, and you can always find us, and you can always also post questions to the listserv to start further conversations that way. So thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you all have a good rest of your week.